Hello everyone, welcome back to Vaishya's YouTube channel. This is Pooja Sharma and I'm back with the continuation of the Shankar IAS environment series. So as you already know that till chapter 4 aquatic species, White sir has taken till there and he will continue from there after few days. So meanwhile what I will do is prelims is nearing, right? So I will parallelly be doing some chapters, later chapters which are starting from biodiversity onwards. So before we begin, this is the WhatsApp details of IAS. You can contact on this number, you can even email us and also visit our YouTube channel. There are a lot of mini series which are going on now which are very important from prelims perspective and will help you for your revision and to learn new things. So let's begin. So this chapter after biodiversity, it deals with Indian biodiversity diverse landscape. So before this we read about biodiversity and now we will be reading about India in detail, the Indian biodiversity. So India is recognized as one of the mega diverse countries which is very rich in biodiversity and it is also associated with traditional knowledge. So with just 2.4% of the land area, India almost accounts for 7% of the recorded species, even while supporting almost 18% of the human population. So in terms of species richness, India it ranks 7th in mammals, 5th in reptiles and 9th in birds. So the varied edaphic, climatic and topographic conditions, they have resulted in a wide range of ecosystems and habitats such as forests, grasslands, coastal and marine ecosystems, wetlands and also deserts in India which have greater biodiversity. So here this edaphic means the soil conditions. So India represents two realms. So these are so India represents two realms, 5 biomes, 10 biogeographic zones and also 25 biogeographic provinces. So the realms are nothing but they are large spatial regions within which ecosystems they share a similar biodata or similar features, and this realm is a continent or a subcontinent which is sized it is a continent or a subcontinent sized area which has unifying features of a geography and also the relief, the topography and the flora and fauna. So you can see this is a realm, all the continents and which are showing in the picture, and in the next point which tells us that the Indian region it is composed of two realms. So they are the Himalayan region which is represented by the Palearctic realm and the rest of the subcontinent it is represented by the Malayan realm. So this Palearctic realm, as you can see this brown area, so from the Himalayas before the mountains it is all this Palearctic, and then the other rest of the subcontinent which is the lower part up till almost upper central India it is Indo-Malayan. So we'll see the difference between them. So this is the difference between Palearctic and Malayan. So Malayan, the other name for it is Oriental. So what you can do is you can quickly pause the video, you can take a screenshot or you can just read quickly and make notes of it. So then we have the second one after realms, which is the biomes of India. So the term biome, it means the main groups of plants and animals which are living in areas of certain climatic patterns. That is nothing but the natural vegetation, what we learnt in the geography class 11th textbook. If you haven't watched it, you can go and watch it. So this is how you have to read geography. You have to connect it with environment also, and when you're reading environment, you have to connect it with geography also. So this includes the way in which animals, vegetation and soil, they'll interact together, the influence which each other have on the environment, the influence that the environment has on these animals, vegetation and the soil. So the plants and the animals which are living in this area, they are adapted to that environment. They get very soon used to all the conditions in and around. And the 5 biomes of India, as we already know, is the tropical humid forests. Humid is nothing but, they have just interchanged the name. Humid is nothing but moist. So tropical moist forest, tropical dry or deciduous forest, which includes monsoon forest. Then we have the warm deserts and semi-deserts. Then we have the coniferous forest and the alpine meadows. So here on the map you can see where they are. Desert is over here. Then we have tropical moist deciduous, which is over here near the coastal areas, Western Ghat. Then tropical wet evergreen. Obviously, first thought which you get about tropical wet evergreen is northeast, because here higher rainfall rates are very much common. And then we have the alpine and the subalpine almost over here in the Himalayan region, this entire mountain belt. So next we have the biogeographic zones. So in India, the biogeography, it deals with the geographical distribution of plants and animals. So if you understand this, if you cut this term into two parts, bio will be our plants and animals, and this geography will be our geographical distribution. So there are 10 biogeographic zones which are distinguished clearly in India, and they are as follows. That is the Trans-Himalaya. So it is an extension of the Tibetan Plateau, which is harboring high altitude cold desert in Ladakh, which is in Jammu and Kashmir. Then we have Lahaul, Lahaul Spiti, which is in Himachal Pradesh, and then so this is comprising 5.7% of the country's landmass. So the Himalayas, the entire mountain chain running from northwestern to northeastern India, it is comprising a diverse range of biotic provinces and biomes. So this is 7.2% of the country's landmass. And then we have desert. So the extremely arid areas west of Aravalli hill range, comprising both the salty desert of Gujarat and the sand desert of Rajasthan. So this accounts to 6.9% of the country's land. It accounts to 6.9% of the country's landmass. So India is divided into 25 biogeographic zones, and then we have the biogeographic provinces. So these biogeographic province, it is an ecosystematic or the biotic division of the realms, which we read in the first slide. So this biogeographic classification of India, it was done by Roger and Panwar in 1988, describing 10 biographic zones in India, which was further divided into 25 biogeographical provinces. So the classification was done using various factors like rainfall, topography, altitude, and then moisture. So the biogeographic zones, they were used as a basis for planning the wildlife protected areas in India. So we are reading about that also simultaneously in the biosphere reserves. Make sure that you go and watch those videos. So these are the biogeographic zones and the biogeographic provinces of India. So you can again pause the video or take a screenshot. These are all short only, so you can just go through it. So here we have Trans-Himalayas, Himalayas, Indian Desert, Deccan Plateau, Western Ghats, semi-arid, the Ganga Plains, coast, Northeast India, and the islands. So these are the main 10 which are important. Rest 15 are other minor ones. So next we have the fauna. So the fauna is nothing but the animals. So the animal kingdom, it is divided into two. One is the vertebrates and one is the invertebrates. So vertebrates have all these, and then invertebrates have all these. So we'll read about them in detail. So the vertebrates, they are animals which have backbone and spinal columns. So these vertebrates, they are known to be the most advanced organisms on earth, and although the vertebrates, they represent a very small percentage of all the animals, their size and the mobility is often allowing them to dominate their environment. So on the first category we have fishes. So they are cold-blooded, they live in water, they breathe underwater using gills, not lungs, and they have scales and fins, and they lay eggs. Then we have amphibians. So they are also cold-blooded, they live on land as well as water, they have webbed feet. like frogs, ducks. So they breathe with lungs and gills both, and they have moist, smooth skin. It will be very slimy when you touch a frog or a snake, not a snake, like when you, because snake is a reptile, not an amphibian. So when you touch a frog, you can feel that slimy coat on top of it. And then they have 4 legs. So sometimes they have none, and they lay eggs. Then we have reptiles. So they are also cold-blooded. They have scales and they have dry skin. Usually lay eggs, and they have ear holes instead of ears. And they have 4 legs or no legs. So here reptile is our snake. Then we have the aves or the birds. So they are warm-blooded, they have feathers and wings, they lay eggs, and also they have 2 legs. They also have ear holes instead of ears. Then we have mammals. So mammals are warm-blooded, they have hair or fur, they give birth to a live young one, and then the mammal mother, they will nurse their young child or the young baby with milk. So they breathe with lungs, and mammals live on land and have 4 legs. They can be 2 legs and 2 arms, and they have ears that will protrude out, stick out. So then we have invertebrates. So invertebrates do not have bones, and more than 98% animal species in the world are invertebrates. So invertebrates, they don't have an internal skeleton which is made up of bone, how we have human beings and other animals. Okay. So many invertebrates, they have fluid-filled hydrostatic skeleton, like the jellyfish or the worm. So jellyfish also, they'll not have any skeletal system. They'll just have this body which is, very squiggly and squishy type. So even when you've seen worms on vegetables or earthworms, you can see they are very squishy, and they don't have a hard bone type structure inside their body. It is completely filled of their muscles and all of that. So others, they have a outer shell like insects and the crustaceans, and the first category is the annelids. So annelids, they have bodies which are divided into segments. So they have a very well-defined, well-developed internal organs. So they are found almost everywhere in the world, and they don't have any limbs. So like earthworms, leeches, and then roundworms. So as I said earlier, and then we have the mollusks. So most mollusks, they have a soft skin-like organ which is covered with a hard shell, outside shell, like snails. So some mollusks, they live on land, such as the snail and slug. Other mollusks, they live in water, such as the oyster, mussel, clam, squid, octopus. So you've seen oysters, right? And clams, from which pearls are extracted. So these are the ones. Then we have the echinoderms. So echinoderms, they are marine animals that live in the ocean. So most of the echinoderms, they have arms or spines which will radiate from the center of the body. So the common echinoderms include the sea star, sea urchin, sand dollar, and the sea cucumber. So now don't get confused over here when they are telling about arms or spine. Here what it will not be very hard spine. It will be a very soft layer of the spinal system, which will just show that different categories. Like when you see a starfish, when you see the center layer, it will be like a very thin, soft spinal structure, which will just differentiate each arm of the starfish. Then we have protozoa. So protozoa, they are simple, single-celled animals, and they are the smallest of all animals. So most of these protozoas, they are microscopic. They can be seen only with the help of a microscope, or in simple terms, they cannot be seen with the naked eye. So they do not breathe, move, and reproduce like multi-celled animals. So examples of protozoa is amoebas and flagellates. So protozoa is over here, and then the next category is the arthropods. So arthropods, they have limbs with joints that will allow them to move, and they also have a exoskeleton, outer skeleton, which is hard, and the external skeleton. So these arthropods, they include the crustaceans and the insects and the arachnids. I'm sorry for my pronunciation. So as you can see on the picture, arthropods are over here, the crustaceans and the insects, all types of insects which you can see over here, and the arachnids, you can see spider over here. So crustaceans, they live mostly in the ocean or other water bodies, and they have a hard external shell which protects their body. So most commonly known crustaceans are the crab, lobster and the barnacle. So then we have the insects. Insects have an exoskeleton that covers their entire body, and an insect consists of 3 body parts, 6 legs and an antenna. So for example, beetle, butterfly, moth, dragonfly, mantis, bee, wasp, praying mantis. Then we have the arachnids. So these common arachnids are spiders, scorpions, ticks and mite. Ticks are nothing but those small insects which are found on dogs. So they feed on the blood of dogs. So arachnids do not have antenna, and arachnids have only 2 body parts and 4 pairs of legs. So you can see over here, this is arachnid, a spider. So then we have the flora diversity. So in terms of plant diversity, India ranks 10th in the world and 4th in Asia. And also India represents nearly 11% of the world's known floral diversity. So you can see next we will be reading about the plant kingdom in detail. So here, cells and tissues, the plant kingdom is divided into 2 categories. Cells and tissues are not highly organized. Cells and tissues organized into functional structures. So here we'll see algae, fungi or fungus, whatever you call it, and then bacteria. And here we'll see 2 types again, that is no vascular tissues. So under no vascular tissues we have the bryophytes, which are the liverworts and the mosses. And under vascular tissues we have dispersed by spores and dispersed by seeds. So under dispersed by spores we are going to read about pteridophytes, I'm sorry for my pronunciation, pteridophytes, which are ferns and horsetails. And then here we have seeds which are not enclosed and seeds which are enclosed. So here we have the gymnosperms like coniflowers, and here angiosperms we have flowering plants or the fruits. So important floral groups found in India are described below. So the number 1 is algae. So the green non-differentiated plants, which are non-differentiated into organs like roots, stems, leaves, which are possessing chlorophyll, are known as algae. So they usually grow in water or in moist situations, and the freshwater algae, they are generally green or blue in color. So whereas the marine ones will be red or brown. So these are autotrophic plants and they prepare their own food. Then we have the fungi or the fungi. So non-green and non-differentiated plants which are characterized by total absence of chlorophyll are called as fungi. So the only difference is when there is chlorophyll present in a plant, it will turn green because the pigment will be green. Whereas when there is absence of chlorophyll, you won't see one single green spot also on the plant. So they grow either on the dead, rotten organic matters as saprophytes, or they live as parasites on other living bodies which are referred to as hosts. So many times you have seen, after few days when we leave the bread packet open, it develops molds on it. So that is nothing but fungus only. So molds and mushrooms are the familiar examples of saprophytic fungi. So the maximum diversity of fungi is in the Western Ghats, which is followed by the Eastern Himalaya and Western Himalaya. Then we have bacteria. So the non-chlorophyllous microorganisms which lead to saprophytic or parasitic existence. So many of them are pathogenic, and the saprophytic bacteria, they are rather beneficial. So they are soil borne. And many of them are used in industries. So then we have lichens. So a lichen is a peculiar combination of an algae and fungus together. So the two, they live deriving mutual benefit. So they'll be dependent on each other. So this is how a lichen looks. It will form on wood or any material. So they are a group of greyish green plants which grow on rocks, tree trunks, dead wood. So the algae manufactures food which becomes available to the fungus and then absorbs and retains water, which keeps the algae cells moist. So this is an example of symbiosis. So they are the most common in wetlands, rare in rivers and streams, and are not found in groundwater. So the next we have the bryophytes. So the plant body, it is differentiated into small stems and simple leaves, but the true roots are absent. So they usually grow in moist places, like for example we have liverworts over here and moses. So they are the second largest group of green plants in India, which is distributed largely in northeastern India, western Himalaya, western Ghats and eastern Himalayas. So moses constitute the major component of Indian bioflora, followed by liverworts and hornworts. So then we have the pteridophytes. So the pteridophytes, they have a very well differentiated plant bodies which is consisting of roots, stems and leaves. So as you can see in the picture, they possess vascular bundles. So most of them, they are terrestrial plants which grow on land, which are flourishing very well in moist and shady places, and some of them will be aquatic. So this group, it includes the vascular cryptogams like club moses, horsetails, ferns, which are universally distributed all around the world. So you can see this is fern over here and this is horsetail. So the northeastern region, which includes the eastern Himalayas, they are rich in pteridophytic diversity, and it is followed by South India, which includes both the eastern and the western Ghats, and also North India, which includes the western Himalayan region. So then we have the gymnosperms. So these gymnosperms are nothing but naked seeded plants. So when we break these gymnosperms into two words, it forms gymnos, which means naked, and sperma, which means seed. So naked seeded plants. So they have a very simple flower without accessory whorls and the stamens and the carpels. They remain aggregated in cones. So the ovules are present on the surface of the carpels only, and the direct pollination, it takes place by the pollen grains on the outer surface. So there is nothing like ovary, style and stigma, and naturally there is no fruit. So the examples of these is the cycas, pinus and the native. So pine is the largest family, and the native and the cycas are mostly confined to northeastern region, eastern and western Ghats, and also the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So then we have the angiosperms. So angiosperms is nothing but they are close seeded plants. So angion means a case. A case means a closed box. So they are most highly developed plants which bear flowers and have these conspicuous accessories and essential whorls. So the carpels, they'll have the stigma, style and ovary, and with the stimulus of fertilization, the ovary will usually develop into the fruit and the ovules will turn into seeds. So the seed will remain within the fruit. For example, apples. When you cut an apple, you see the seed is inside, right? So apple is a perfect example. Then India has more than 7% of the world's known flowering plants. So over here you can see apple, then tomato, then these are other examples. So the floral endemism of India in order is that in peninsular India and including western Ghats and eastern Ghats, it is about 2600 species. So this floral endemism is nothing but our plant diversity. So eastern Himalayas and northeastern region, it has 2500, then we have northern and western Himalayas 800, and Andaman and Nicobar Islands 250. So then we have the crop genetic diversity. So agriculture, it is a very dominant driver and mainstay of the economic growth in India, because heavily most of the population is dependent on agriculture. So the large mosaic of distant agro ecosystems, they are characterized by variations in edaphic, that is the soil, climatic and geographic features. So this has contributed to the diverse cropping patterns and the systems which are found across the country. We see that one single plant is not being grown. We see many different varieties of crops. So India stands 7th in the world in terms of the contribution of species to agriculture and animal husbandry. And also the National Gene Bank at National Bureau of Plant Genetic Resources, which is in Delhi, is primarily responsible for conservation of unique accessions on long-term basis, and also the base collection for posterity, predominantly in the form of seeds. Then we have the livestock genetic diversity. So in India, vast resources of livestock and poultry, they play a very vital role in rural livelihood security. And in terms of population, India ranks first in buffaloes, 6th in camels, 5th in chicken, 4th in ducks, 2nd in cattle and goats, and 3rd in sheep. So this is the ranking in the world, India's ranking in the world. So you can see in every category you will find one animal, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th. So the genetic resources of farm animals in India, they are represented by a broad spectrum of native breeds of cattle, buffaloes, goats, sheep, swines. Swines are nothing but pigs. Then we have the equines, camels and the poultries. So over the year, animal husbandry has intensified in India with widespread introduction of exotic breeds. So what has happened is, because of this, it has led to the reduction of total genetic variability and population size of many local breeds. They have been neglected. So the majority, which is the 85% of the domestic livestock in India, it is reared under low input production systems. So wildlife of India. So the Himalayan mountain system is the first category. So the West Himalayas, they have low rainfall and heavy snowfall. Obviously, Himalaya is the only region where only snowfall occurs, and rainfall will be very minimum or very less, because it won't reach up to the higher regions. So whereas in East Himalayas there is heavy rainfall and snowfall is only at a very higher altitude. So whereas at the lower altitudes you will find conditions which are similar to tropical rainforest. So as we had learnt in geography series class 11th, we had learned that how on a mountain there will be different belts of vegetation. So the flora and fauna of both Himalayas, that is the West Himalayas and the East Himalayas, it will differ. So the Himalayan foothills flora, it has natural monsoon evergreen and semi-evergreen forests. So the dominant species are sal, silk cotton trees, giant bamboos, tall grassy meadows with a savanna feature in the Tarai region. Then in the Western Himalayas, which is the high altitude region, the flora over here will be, so the flora over here is natural monsoon evergreen and semi-evergreen forest. Then we have the rhododendrons. Then we have the dwarf hill bamboo and the birch forest, which is mixed with alpine pastures. So we have already read this in vegetation and when we were reading about the Himalayas, different types of Himalayas. So Eastern Himalayas, they have a flora which is filled with oaks, magnolias, laurels and birches, which is covered with moss and ferns, and also the coniferous forests of pine, fir, yew and junipers, which have undergrowth of scrubby rhododendrons and dwarf bamboos. Then we have lichens, mosses, orchids and also other epiphytes which are dominant due to the high humidity and the high amount of rainfall. So in the peninsular region, the Indian sub-region, it has two zones. One is the peninsular India and its extension into the drainage bases of Ganga river system. And then we have the desert region of Rajasthan, which is the Thar Desert. So in peninsular India, it is a home to tropical moist deciduous to tropical dry deciduous, and also scrub type vegetation, which is depending upon the variation in rainfall and humidity which is present in that particular region. So the flora which is found over here is, we can see sal in north, and in the east extensions we can see teak in the we can see sal in north and east extensions which has higher rainfall, and we can see teak in the southern plateau which has dominant trees of teak. So the Western Ghats, they have evergreen vegetation, flora and fauna which is similar to the evergreen forest of the northeastern parts of India. So in the dry areas of Rajasthan and Aravalli hills, the trees will be scattered, and then there will be thorny scrub species which are predominant over here. And the forests, they have a more open space, like a open savanna type. So the Indian desert is the next category, where the Thar Desert of Rajasthan has unique flora and fauna. So the flora over here is nothing but the thorny trees which has reduced leaves in order to prevent the loss of water. Then we can see cacti or the cactus over here, and other succulents which are the main plants. So the tropical rainforest region, so it is distributed in areas of Western Ghats and Northeast India. We already know this. So this is like a revision also. So flora over here is the extensive grasslands which are interspersed with densely forested gorges, I'm sorry for the pronunciation, of evergreen vegetation which is known as the sholas. So they occur in the Nilgiris, an offshoot of Western Ghats. So the sholas, they also occur in Annamalai and Palani hills, and also the rainforest of the Western Ghats, they have very dense and lofty trees with much species diversity. So over here we can see mosses, ferns, epiphytes, orchids, lianas, vines, herbs, shrubs. So these make the habitat more diverse. So we also find the presence of ebony trees which are very predominant in these forests, and a variety of tropical orchids are also found over here. So we can see one feature over here is that the stratification in the rainforest is very distinct. Like in one belt you will see one vegetation, in another belt you will see another vegetation. So there are three horizontal layers of the different forests or vegetation. So then we have the Andaman Nicobar Islands, the flora which is present over here. So they are basically home to tropical rainforest which has giant Dipterocarpus, Terminalia, and Largostroemia which is dominant. So you don't have to worry after looking at these words. You don't have to by heart them. You just need to know what type of forest is found in this region. So you can just know that tropical rainforest is found over here. So then we have the mangrove swamps of Sundarbans. So we know that mangroves are very well distributed in the coastal areas. So the Sundarbans are the deltas of the Ganga, where both the Brahmaputra and the Ganga will join, and also they'll drain into the Bay of Bengal. So then we have the flora. So the low tidal zones which are pioneer trees like the Sonaratia or Sonaratia and the Avicennia. So again, you don't have to by heart these names, don't worry. I've just put it over here for reference. So above this zone, they are Rhizophora, Bruguiera, and then we have the Excaria. Then we have the Cerops forest, which is covering 70% of the mangrove forest. Again, you just have to know over here that where is mangrove forest found, and then this specific Sundari tree, which is how it got its name Sundarbans. So this is all you have to know. And then above this level, they are supporting forest of the phoenix in association with Excaria. So they are Haracia. So this Harateria or Haricia forest, this is nothing but the Sundari trees. So this is in highest portion with thick undergrowth of phoenix and nipa palms. So we are done with this chapter. This was the last slide. So don't worry about these big complicated names, even with the names which you saw in the previous video of all the plants which we had seen in biosphere reserves. You don't have to by heart them. It is just, I just included them so that you can just have a look at it. You just have to know where it is found, what type of tree is dominant in that area, and the conditions how it gave rise to that type of vegetation. So these are the boxes which were there in the textbook in this chapter. So you can pause and just look at it. There are some interesting facts about different animals and all of that, like current affair type only. So we're done with this chapter, and make sure that you're liking all our videos, you're sharing these videos, and also commenting. Your feedback is very, very important to us, because you know, after reading your feedbacks, we'll get to know what are your expectations from us. So subscribe to our channel for more detailed videos, because in the upcoming days we are going to get a lot of new videos which will be really helpful for you, and no other coaching channel will provide you such free lectures in such a detailed manner. Everybody does it in shortcuts, but we provide full detailed informations. So make sure that you are liking, sharing and subscribing. Also make sure to comment in the comment section below. I'll be back with the next chapter. Until then, all the best and thank you.